The impetus was my daughter, Anna. My wife and I adopted her. Her birth mother had done crystal meth throughout the entire pregnancy. And she had a stroke before she was born. She was born blind. The expectation was we just would know what to do with her. And so one of the first things was that she had failure to thrive. But the system didn't expect much from her. The system basically expected her to be a kid crunched over in a wheelchair in a corner somewhere in her future life. That was as good as it got for them. And so we said no to that. Instead of having people come to me who had chronic fatigue and fibro and Lyme and mold-related illnesses and post-concussive syndrome and brain, all these weird things that there's no really good category to put them into. And people started having really good results and getting better. I mean, the basics, I look at Blue Zone. I'm a simple guy. Try to keep things simple, but they all eat real food. And the food they eat is vastly different, right? Environments are clean. Physical activity is a part of their lifestyle, like being physically active and moving. We now know that sitting is a new smoking, right? The angle I look at is listen to your body, trust your gut. If you feel like something's off, you're not thinking quite as clearly, you're having gut issues, you're sleeping poorly, you've got weird aches and pains, whatever the symptoms are, like trust yourself, trust your gut. If you feel like something's off, don't let someone, just because they have a bunch of certifications in the wall, tell you it's all in your head, there's nothing wrong with you. Fasting is nuanced. It's the new superfood.
What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the True Form podcast. Before we dive into today's episode, I just want to thank the legends at Lumaflex for sponsoring today's episode. I'm actually blown away how this little red light therapy device is dramatically improving my health, recovery, vitality. Later on in the episode, I'll tell you how I've been using it and why you should think about getting one yourself. But first, we'll dive into today's conversation to help us, you and me, find our true form.
It's rock and roll, man.
Let's rock and roll. Aaron, thanks for coming on the podcast.
It's great to be here.
I appreciate your time and coming on. I've been looking forward to this conversation. Unfortunately, we got a little bit of a mix-up and we had to reschedule, so it's been a long time coming, so I'm excited to dive into it. I want to start with what gets you excited to wake up and do the things you're doing? We'll obviously dive into your story and what you're doing at the moment, but what drives you? You wake up, what do you think of, and what drives you to get through the day?
I've been asked that question a lot. I don't have like an emotional drive. I'm very duty driven. It's very much that these are the things, to whom much is given, much is required kind of sort of thing. And so I've got these talent, skills, things are given to me, and there's an expectation. I do enjoy learning new things. I enjoy doing hard things. I enjoy, difficult cases, we'll probably talk about later on. One part of my morning routine, I get up, read my Bible for a little bit, and then I will study like whatever. I'm just finished actually a functional dentistry certification course, right? So learning how the mouth connects with everything else in the body. And so I'll just take these deep dives, and as I'm going through stuff, patients, pictures will pop in my head, and I'll be like, ooh, and send them a note like, hey, da-da-da. So part of like the drive is part of the drive also as well, which is interesting, is I have a mantra that I say when I drive into work every day, which is to see what can't be seen, to hear it can't be heard, and diagnose what can't be diagnosed. And it routinely happens. So someone will come to the clinic, they came from like, I'm the 15th doctor they've seen. And I'll literally read something a week or two before that applies to them. And like when that happens enough, all of a sudden there's this like, I don't know if you've got like an angst, like you don't go to the, like you get in the habit of going to the gym, right? Like, or you get in a habit of doing whatever it is, and then you miss it for a week, and all of a sudden there's this angst, like I haven't gone to the gym in a week, or I haven't done this or a week. And for me, there's this angst, like if I stop learning, stop reading, stop doing new things, I get this angst, like I'm like, what if, like, what am I missing? And part of that is just knowing that people are coming to me for a particular reason, and it's because the last 5, 6, 7 doctors couldn't help them. And so like if I don't keep up that skill set, keep learning new things, there may be a point in time at which someone comes expecting something from me. I won't be able to provide that to them. And it's just like feed forward cycle. It's kind of once you get doing cool things and you see someone have a really good result, all of a sudden it kind of like, ooh, can I do that again? Ooh, can I do that again? And it almost like feeds itself.
Yeah, I love that. So let's dive into your history. Where did it all start? Like you said, people come to see you now. So what are you doing now and how'd you get there?
Well, what I am now, I am a triple board certified medical doctor. And my practice has evolved over the last 15 years. And the impetus was my daughter, Anna. My wife and I adopted her. My wife is an occupational therapist who specialized with kids with special needs. And Anna was one of her patients. And Anna actually, her birth mother had done crystal meth throughout the entire pregnancy. So she had a stroke before she was born. She was born blind, just she was a mess basically. And so when we got her to our home, the expectation was we just would know what to do with her. And so one of the first things was that she had failure to thrive, which is she was just really, really small. So we had to feed her. So we were doing the best we could. I thought she was doing good. And then she did the follow up with the GI doctor. And the GI doctor was like, she's still failing to thrive. Let's put a feeding tube in her, pour formula in the belly to put meat on her bones, regardless of whether like that affects the ability to talk, because chewing and swallowing is important for speech development, or it affects the ability to crawl and walk because having a tube hanging out. I mean, how do you learn to crawl when you got this plastic thing hanging on your belly? But the system didn't expect much from her. The system basically expected her to be a kid crunched over in a wheelchair in a corner somewhere in her future life. That was as good as it got for them. And so we said no to that. And when we said no, we got reported Child Protective Services for medical neglect. Had to work through that. So that was an interesting kind of like aha moment. Like the system doesn't like it when you say no. But yeah, I know. But 6 months later, my wife found a growth chart for kids with cerebral palsy, which the specialist had no idea this growth chart existed. And in that growth chart, my daughter was in the middle. She was normal for a kid with CP. And so like that second aha moment was the experts don't know. And so the seeds that were planted were, one, the system doesn't like it when you say no. And two, the experts don't know. And so as a medical doctor, all of a sudden I'm like, who's going to figure this out for my new daughter? Well, I'm the dad, it's my responsibility. So all of a sudden, like I had this weight, like I have to start studying, starting at 4 o'clock in the morning, pulling articles, following anybody who talked about any kind of neurological issues in kids, and started developing data points, learning things, getting off the beaten path. And like those seeds I got planted early on eventually started changing my daughter's trajectory. She started doing things she wasn't supposed to do, like talk and see and write. And now she's getting ready to turn 20 and she's supposed to be moving out of the home here in the next month or so. So she's my first kid to move out of the house, actually. But like to have that pathway, and then as a medical doctor, starting to be like with patients coming in, oh, you've had chronic fatigue and fibro, which is a psychiatric issue back 15 years ago. We were told it was just people with mental health issues. And me to think, I heard about this thing called yeast overgrowth syndrome. Let me give you some diflucan and see what happens. And then all of a sudden this patient, I actually write about this one in my book, their chronic fatigue disappears for like a month or two. And started having success with patients randomly, and then just kept on evolving, eventually put up a shingle. Hey, let me see if people will come to me just for this kind of new medicine. Instead of having people come to me who had chronic fatigue and fibro and Lyme and mold-related illnesses and post-concussive syndrome and brain, all these weird things that there's no really good category to put them into. And people started having really good results and getting better. I had one guy who he had head and neck cancer and got chemotherapy for it and developed horrible nerve damage, neuropathy, which is a common side effect of chemo. Came to me, we did some things with him, did an organic acid test on him, addressed some nutritional issues. And I remember seeing him back 6 months later, and I'm like, oh, yeah, how's your pain doing? He's like, oh, I forgot. I guess I did have that. It's gone now. And so you see enough of those, and after a while, you're like, huh, maybe I should start doing more of this and less of that, right? And so my practice just evolved. And so now that's all I do is these complicated cases of people that have been to multiple doctors, multiple specialists, and told you there's nothing wrong with them. It's all in their head. They can't be helped. They come to see me, and then we figure out, what we can do for them.
We'll dive into what people should be doing for their overall health, wellness, and longevity. But let's go back. So it was about 20 years ago when you started transitioning into that different way of thinking, and I guess pushing back against the medical industry. What was that like? I ask this question from a lens of a lot of people will hold on to who they doctors are trained in a certain way. This is how we do it. To let go of that and start transitioning into something else is very hard. And I find a lot of people will hold on to their identity, even though that there's a better way out there, and they won't accept change. So how was it going through that? And is there any lessons that you can pass on to people that can see a different way of doing things, but aren't ready to sort of move into it yet?
I mean, I don't, you hear all these stories about people who tried this and they got their license pulled, or this happened to them or that happened to them. I was already a practicing physician in a successful practice, working in the hospital. I'd see our admitting patients to the ICU, admitting them to the ER, interacting with the specialists in a busy clinic, with 4 or 5 other doctors. Grew the clinic up to ultimately our clinic was seeing over 50,000 patients a year were coming through the clinic. So I was able to build up the successful practice. And so I was already kind of a known entity in the local community as a smart young physician. And so as I started doing these newer things, I just kind of got this reputation. All of a sudden, the Hartman, they're kind of difficult. He'll take care of them. And so for me, it was an evolution over a long period of time that got sped up by my daughter, by her story, and then by collecting more of these complicated cases. And I also started, in the meantime, also started a clinical research company. I think the thing for me was being good at your primary thing and developing a patient base of people who knew your character, know the kind of person you are. And then all of a sudden, when you start doing these new things, they're not going to think, I'm not the weird traveling circus guy who just showed up one day and says, hey, I got these magic beans that fix everything. I was a known entity. And so my clinical experience wasn't a lot of pushback in our local community because people already kind of knew who I was. And now Richmond's a city of about 1.3 million people. I'll get referrals routinely from around the city, other specialists. I had a urologist last week want to talk with me about one of his patients with prostate cancer, because there are things we can do to actually slow the progression and actually abate it, and slow growing cancers. And so I've kind of got this reputation. But the thing was, I think the take home point was I was really good at my basic thing before I started doing new things. I just didn't take the shiny new object and go, hey, you functional medicine or whatever it is. Let me peptides, stem cells, exosomes. I think that's where people get off the beaten path because they don't really get good at the basics. They jump over that and go into the fancy, shiny objects. And then all of a sudden, that can sound kind of like you don't quite know what you're talking about because you don't even know the basics. So how do you know this fancy stuff if you know about diabetes or heart disease or reversing calcium scores or, treating cancers and metabolic disease? How do you know this when you can't even do like the basic stuff? And so I feel like that's, where people get in trouble is they kind of jump over becoming a master at the foundational stuff and they jump right to the cool stuff. Mm-hmm. Which all of a sudden you're not going to be good at the cool stuff if you haven't mastered the basics.
Yeah, I was having that conversation the other day with another guest, and it's like everybody wants to win the marathon, but the first 100 meters, and they sprint to the 100 meters, and then they can't finish the race because they've spent their energy. And it's the same with the fitness industry. I'm a personal trainer, and I've been doing this long enough now. You know the basics. You know what works. There's certain things that people just have to do to get stronger or fitter. But you always see new coaches come along and they jump on the new trend, and a couple of months later, you don't see them anymore because they've burned through all their clients and it just doesn't work.
I mean, it's, professional athletes, professional soccer players perfect the basics, passing, basic stuff. They're the cool people who do like, bicycle kicks and stuff like that. But, it's like the basics. And so I think in any field, people want to do the cool, fancy stuff, the trending stuff, right? The things that, trend on social media or the newest fad. And what happens, they go from like waves tossed to and fro by the sea, by the wind, right? And because they don't have a firm foundation in the foundation of me for medicine, basic science, basic medicine, all of a sudden they don't know like the nuances of a carnivore or a keto, a vegan diet. And it's really funny, my joke is like the newest the keto, vegan, carnivore diet. I mean, like, it's whatever's trending and you don't know, well, there's places in the world they do this, there's places in the world they do that. And without a good foundation in nutritional medicine, environmental medicine, all this kind of stuff, it's people are literally going to be pushed around by whatever the current trend is.
Well, let's dive into that. You've done over 100,000 clinical encounters. What are the basics that people should be doing to live a long, healthy life?
I mean, the basics, I look at Blue Zone. I'm a simple guy. I try to keep things simple. I know it sounds silly to say that. I have 3 board certifications. 80% of heart disease and 70% of most cancer can be attributed to diet and lifestyle alone. If you look at Blue Zones, places that people live to be 100 more than anywhere else in the world, Nicoya, Costa Rica, Sardinia, Italy, Loma Linda, California, Okinawa, Japan, and then like Okinawa, a Greek island off of Greece. Like they don't have access to fancy hospitals. They're actually very rural environments minus Loma Linda, California, but they all eat real food, and the food they eat is vastly different, right? Environments are clean. Physical activity is a part of their lifestyle, like being physically active and moving. We now know that, sitting is a new smoking, right? If you're not physically active, that increases your risk for all-cause mortality like 80% and developing diabetes like 90% just from sitting around, right? Sitting is horrible. Movement is the new super drug, right? And they have a sense of purpose and meaning. They have close family connections, close social connections. Those are the foundations for longevity, you know? And so, yes, there's stem cells, exosomes, peptides, BPC157, whatever the coolest fancy thing is, but those are supposed to be on top of perfecting the basics. And I kind of figured that out accidentally with my daughter because we focused first on food with her, activity and movement, and added all these other cool things later on. And I feel like that's the foundation for why she, a kid with cerebral palsy, why she's beaten every odd. At 20, she's not had surgery in her life, had antibiotics once since we've had her. These are things that are unheard of for kids with cerebral palsy.
We'll get back to today's episode shortly, but first, are you somebody that works out regularly, sleeps the right amount, eats all the healthy food, but you still feel like you're not getting the results you deserve? It's not some crazy workout routine, fancy new supplement, or restrictive diet that is missing in your life. The thing that is missing that will help you find your true form and finally get those results that you deserve is me. Yes, me. I've been a personal trainer for about 15 years now, coming up on 300 podcast episodes where I've interviewed athletes, coaches, doctors, authors, high performers, and a bunch of other people, which means I know what we need to work on to find your true form and finally get those results you deserve. One of the biggest things I've realized over the last 15 years and 300 podcast episodes is that there's not one thing that is going to help you get those results. Finding your true form is very individualized. And when we work together, we work on your mind, body, and your identity, which means you're going to follow a workout program that I design around your goals, your abilities, and your lifestyle. We're going to make sure that you're eating all the right foods and not the foods that you see on social media that you think you should be eating. We find out what works for you. And obviously you're going to be following all those good sleeping habits. But we're also going to work on your identity. And their identity is a big part that a lot of people are missing and is why they feel like they're not getting the results they deserve. So if you are somebody that wants to finally get those results you deserve and start living a life that is true to you, hit the link in the description. I would love to work with you and help you get there. Let's get back to the episode. So I guess it's that coming down to trying to win that race in the first 100 meters again. Everybody is jumping to the peptides or insert whatever here to try and get more. So what's the conversation look like when you have a patient like that who wants to jump, if you get patients like that, who wants to jump straight into the finish line without doing all that hard work?
Trying to meet people where they're at. The reality is if you don't give people what they want, you can't give them what they need. And so a lot of times people will come to me like, I want testosterone because my T's low. I'm like, well, yeah, your T's a little low, but you also have sleep apnea and you have metabolic syndromes. If we don't address those, then T's going to work for 6 months and then it's not going to work anymore. So I will use education. I'll use my, developing relationship to leverage it. It's almost like, I cut my teeth with this back in the day with smoking. When I was in the military, we had a smoking cessation clinic. And I learned early on, like the average patient, I would see we'd have to talk to them 7 times before and recommend them to quit smoking before they even tried once, right? And then people fail multiple times. So it's like, if you don't have that relationship with them that has longevity, you'll never get that smoker you'll never be there around for the first attempt or the second or third or the fourth until they have success, right? And so that's the way all this stuff is you have to develop the relationship so they know, like, and trust you. So when you say, hey, you want your T's low, great, right? Let's give you a little testosterone, but you grind your teeth at night. You've got some cracked teeth. You have dental pain. I think you have sleep apnea. Let's get this tested and get this looked at. Oh, by the way, you have metabolic syndrome and your A1C's up a little bit. Okay, low testosterone is a part of metabolic syndrome. So we have to start looking at other things, right? Then people will buy into that a little more if you have the relationship. So but you have to meet people where they're at, because what gets in the door many times is they want the shiny objects, right? They want the really cool, fancy new thing. And so it's an art, it's a dance. I'm not a paternalistic individual. I don't say, I'm the doctor, you do what I say. That's not my style. And it does bite me sometimes. Sometimes people will go on these pathways and I kind of follow them down the wrong pathway. But throughout the whole time, I do develop a relationship with patients. And I think that's where you get true change. And they know that I really want what's best for them. And they know that. They don't think I'm there trying to sell them something. I'm not trying to sell you supplements. I'm not trying to sell you peptides. I'm not trying to sell you anything. And when you give people the shiny objects they ask, they get to the point in time where they're kind of like, I think you're just selling me stuff because you kind of give me everything I want, right? So it's a give and take a little bit, but that's kind of like my personal style.
Mm, mm. So where would people, I guess where I'm trying to figure out, like, people come in, they're sick, well, they have something wrong and they don't understand why. Like, what questions? I'm all about curiosity. I believe, like, you need to be curious to, your own health and figure it out as well. But obviously, seeing somebody like yourself that is also curious, like you said, big part of what drives you is curiosity. So how should people think about their curiosity and their body? Because as we were sort of alluding to, there's a lot of BS out there, and it can be very attractive to just jump to the end. So I know it's a bit of a hard question to answer, but those people that do have something wrong, they've seen 15 other doctors before they get to you. How should they be thinking about curiosity within their body
I mean, maybe
or
I'm
their
going
health?
to, yeah, I'm going to look at it from a different angle, maybe. The angle I look at is listen to your body, trust your gut. Because, if you feel like something's off, you're not thinking quite as clearly, you're having gut issues, you're sleeping poorly, you've got weird aches and pains, whatever the symptoms are, like trust yourself, trust your gut. If you feel like something's off, don't let someone just because they have a bunch of certifications on the wall tell you it's all in your head, there's nothing wrong with you. Now you might have a psychological issue, and you definitely want to look into that, but most of the time, people are getting medically gaslit. They're told nothing's wrong with them, it's all in their head. There's these massive blind spots in our healthcare system. Like if something is outside of the normal specialty, the normal textbook learning, these become blind spots. And long COVID is a great example. We can talk about hormone replacement therapy in women. We just literally said that's okay as of January of 2020. I'm sorry, November of 2025. So in the United States, it's been okay. The FDA removed the black box warning like for 6 months, right? In my world, we've been doing it for decades, but the FDA just said it's okay. A couple, there's another great example. The government reversed their findings on fat. Fat's back in the United States. When we said for over half a century, fat's bad for you, right? And so there's massive blind spots. And so you have to realize that the experts don't always know, and you just trust your intuition, trust your gut. But I think that's also where curiosity, maybe education comes into play, because it's more than just a hunch. You need to educate, you need to fill it with information and knowledge.
Mm.
And as you do that, you will get answers, you'll find stuff. There are answers out there. And one thing I tell people is if you feel like something's off, don't give up, because something probably is off. Learn things, get more tests, find someone who'll come alongside you and walk with you, not someone who's going to be like, okay, I'm like specialist XYZ. These are the 5 things I treat. You don't have one of those 5 things. There's nothing wrong with you. I'm like, how does that work? And that's kind of how the specialty fields work. There's like 5 or 6 things a specialist do. And if what you deal is outside of that, then there's nothing wrong with you. And fibromyalgia and chronic fatigue, I'm not sure how Australia looks at it, but the UK calls it myalgic encephalomyelitis. In the United States, there's still a significant number of physicians who still think it's a psychiatric issue. We now know it's a brain inflammatory condition. And 20 years ago, we told people, mainly women who suffer with this, that it was all in their head. And so that's a great example of how wrong we got something that even to this day, it's still misunderstood.
Mm. Yeah, people hold on to those beliefs for a long time, don't they? Until, I guess, like yourself, until something comes along that makes you be curious and finds the answers for yourself.
Yeah, there's a saying that medicine advances one funeral at a time. And
Yeah.
it kind of speaks to the fact that once you learn something, you tend not to change the way you think. And that's just herd mentality. It doesn't matter how smart you are, how bright you are. We all have it to a certain degree. And the outliers are outliers for a reason, because they think outside the box, right? And so, and that's, that's the 20% of the 20% of the 20%, which is the top 1%. Those are the people who are way outside the box, and so, and unfortunately, sometimes they're so outside the box that the things they're realizing don't become standard of care for 20, 30, and sometimes 40 years, which is really interesting to think about that as well.
You did touch on hormone replacement there for females. What did you mean by that?
Hormone replacement. Well, but was I talking about females or males? Because I was in my mind thinking about males. But
Well, go males.
okay, hormone replacement. So a great example is I see men who come in with low testosterone, and what's often overlooked, if you have there's primary and secondary. So primary, one type of hormone deficiency is your testicles stop making testosterone because they fail. Another one is your brain stops telling your testicles um, to make testosterone, and they're totally different things. We overlook that, and so we say you have low T, here's your testosterone. But if you have low testosterone and you're overweight, you have metabolic syndrome, you have sleep apnea, chronic stress, you need to address those things if you want the testosterone to get better. Then there's athletes who can come in looking fit, big, strong, and they have low testosterone. They can be overtraining, and their testosterone can be related to overtraining. It's now all of a sudden now the answer is not testosterone. It's like, look, you need to actually, you're overtraining. You need to work on, shorter training. Maybe you need to start doing hyperbarics. Maybe you need to start doing IVs or peptides or other things, or, doing lots of nutrition, doing like organic acid testing and seeing where you're deficient and then plugging those in so your body can actually recoup after you train, which is what professional, high level professional athletes. I remember reading about the Bulgarian weightlifting team. They'd work out for 40 minutes, take an hour off, 40 minutes, take an hour off. They weren't working out for 8 hours a day. And many athletes, even semi-pro or college or even pro athletes, will overtrain. You have to realize that that's their job. If you have a full-time job and you're all big and bulked up, you're probably overtraining because you have your job for 8 hours a day and you're training. And a lot of those individuals actually will get an overtraining syndrome and develop low testosterone. So the question always is, why is your testosterone low? Is it primary or secondary? So primary is like the testicles stop working. Secondary is the whole brain thing. If it's primary, then it's like, okay, was this a chemical exposure? Was it a trauma? We're in the military. Did you get chemical exposure? Blah, blah, blah. If it's secondary, it's like, okay, why, is this a pituitary tumor? Blah, 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 which are kind of rare. But it's usually related to some underlying inflammation, metabolic problem in the average population. And then an athlete, like, weekend warriors or guys in their 40s and 50s that, run marathons or whatever, they're usually overtraining.
Stress is a big thing, like you said. Like, people don't realize that exercise can just stress your body out as well.
I mean, if you work out, this is what's crazy to think about. If you work out anywhere from, obviously it depends on how hard you work out, but if you're working out for 50 minutes to 60 minutes or more a day, you're probably overtraining. Yeah, and so all of a sudden it's like, what are you doing to abate that? And that's where, like, one of the things that people don't realize with cold plunges, why are cold plunges, why they become popular? I remember it was the Sochi Olympics, whenever that was, like a decade ago. You saw like the skiers were skiing, they hop in the cold plunge. If you kill yourself and you strain a bunch and tear a bunch of muscles down, that creates a lot of inflammation. But if you put ice on it, how do hurt my elbow, ice on it, right? If you put your whole body into it, you can block that whole inflammatory cascade from working out really, really hard, recoup, and then train again. And so they kind of figured that actually can help their training. That's probably one of the reasons why, in a higher level athletics, they actually are doing that more, because it actually it's a biohack, a way to get to that overtraining things, take a break, do your cold plunge, relax, do some meditation, some guided imagery, maybe some acupuncture, massage, faster work, and then you go back to training again, But you have to be. That's like if that's your job. That's not the average person. That's it. That's your job.
I think that's what a lot of people don't realize, that is their job. You can't just go and train 8 hours a day after you've just worked your own job for 8 hours. Like, sleep's important. Is it the same for females? So, like, we just talked about how training, stress, not sleeping, food can affect testosterone. Is it the same for females?
Yeah, it's the same for females, and they're actually a little more sensitive to it, because a woman's physiology is more nuanced. I mean, their physiology is such that their bodies are made to have foreign objects. Not just a foreign liver, not just a foreign kidney, not just a foreign brain, but a whole entire foreign person with different DNA live and grow inside their body without their body immunologically rejecting it. Like, if we can figure out how this works, we can actually eliminate organ rejection from transplant, right? This is a really cool thing that the female body is actually wired to do, that we don't quite understand it. And when you take that system and then you stress it, and just it's interesting how one of the things when young women overtrain, they stop cycling, they lose breast tissue, they lose fat in places that it's natural for a female who's fertile to have fat, like the hourglass kind of figure. And there's actually a metabolic physique for women that you'll see where they don't have thigh muscle mass, they don't have buttocks muscle mass. And you can look at someone, and in certain cultures are more prone to this physique. You can be slender, but you don't have certain muscle and fat in certain places. You'll see it more in Indians and Asians, and we kind of call it skinny fat. It's like a metabolic quote unquote obesity. And you check their A1C and they're pre-diabetic. And you can see a 20, 25-year-old female, attractive, slender, but they don't have that. You look at them and you kind of get developed the idea, like you don't look like you look at this skinny fat and you do an A1C on them, a fasting sugar, and their sugar's like 120 and their A1C's, 6.1. You're like, whoa, you're pre-diabetic and you're like not overweight. So women, because of their physiology, are probably even a little more sensitive to this. And also because of their cycles, like the first part of your cycle, you can during your estrogen dominant part versus your progesterone dominant part, it's like the follicular versus luteal phase. You can push it harder, you can lift heavier, you can fast, all that kind of stuff. Progesterone dominant, which is day 14 to 25 plus or minus, you actually need more carbs, but you're also more sensitive to sugar fluctuations. That's not when you want to run your 20-mile week or whatever it is, right? You need to take that into account. We've told women for decades, you're just the same as men. There's no difference in your physiology. You can do all the same thing that God does, and it's like we forgot the whole thing. Like their body physiology is different. They are built different, and if you don't respect that, you can actually put women into premature ovarian failure. You can have them in the mid-30s when the hormones are whacked up and testosterone's low. It's amazing how many women I'm seeing now, like in their mid to late 30s, have low testosterone. Like you're like in the prime of your reproductive life. Why is your testosterone undetectable? And like, oh, lost my libido, and they're losing muscle mass, and like it's interesting. It's more nuanced. And so the things I mentioned are even more important in the females, particularly females that are training, than it would be in a male.
Can we go over a couple of trends to get your thoughts on?
Sure.
These come up in my day-to-day work all the time because, again, when you're in health and fitness, people obviously watch a lot of social media and they're like, I've seen this, so I'm going to do this. And I'm like, well, hold on a second. Fasting. Can you talk about fasting, and should the general public do it?
Fasting is nuanced. It's the new superfood. So, fasting is a new superfood, which, what do you mean by that? There's so many health benefits to fasting. The idea of getting into low-grade ketosis. When you fast, you're sleeping, for example, the lymphatics in your brain called the glial lymphatics are actually removing more trash, more waste products from your brain. Fasting has a massive impact on mitochondrial efficiency. If you're always throwing sugar down your mouth and you don't ever make your mitochondria stress, they won't function as well. So you can actually improve your energy efficiency. Your body's made to work on three forms of energy: sugar, fat, and protein. And you can actually turn protein into sugar, and you can turn fat into ketones. And so your body is it's like you can take gas, you put gasoline, kerosene, and propane into the same car, right? Like that's where your body, or maybe electric or whatever three you like. And fasting actually stretches you across the whole spectrum of that. Okay, so it actually has a lot of health benefits. But one thing that happens when you're fasting is it actually ramps up your phase 1 detoxification. And so there's different types of phase 1, phase 2, and phase 3. And phase 2 detoxification requires amino acids, and then phase 3 usually happens in your gut. I won't go into detail with that. But what happens with the average American, I'm sure it's probably the same in Australia, we have such a toxic overload. We're so burdened with chemicals and things in the environment that when you ramp up the phase 2 detox, you have a massive kind of die-off kind of detox kind of thing. And if you don't have adequate protein in your diet, then your body can't handle it. So all of a sudden, when people will do these fasts, now feel awful, feel terrible, and you look at them like you came into this with a protein deficient diet, horrible diet, you're incredibly toxic, like you need to work your way into this. And what I've found is the average American isn't healthy enough and metabolically flexible enough to fast, which is insane because we all fasted back in the day. We ran out, there's this phrase, pray for spring, right? Pray for rain. Why was that a saying? Because you run out of food in the wintertime and it's a drought, right? You literally go, God, please, we need food, right? And you would naturally fast seasonally. And then basically every ancient religion has fasting built into the worship cycle. And we've gone to a place where we eat breakfast, lunch, and dinner, we snack and go eat something before we go to bed. And our bodies are so metabolically inflexible, full of toxins, that something as basic as fasting, a lot of people can't tolerate it. So is fasting great? It is. Do I do it? Absolutely. But it's a sad state of affairs where the average American is not healthy enough and not metabolically flexible enough to actually go right into the fast. They need to work their way up to it, increase the protein nutrients. If your B vitamins are deficient, if your magnesium levels are deficient, which is the average person in America, you have an imbalance of your fatty acids, you actually might feel worse fasting. And so if you're someone who can't naturally fast, can't just like, like when I do a fast day, I do like a 24-hour fast. Yeah, I get a little foggy in the afternoon, a little irritable. And, I come home from work, my kids, I'm a little more irritated than usual with them, right? And all that kind of stuff. But I can do it, right? If you can't do it relatively easy, there's something else going on under the hood. So when people say, oh, I can't fast, I can't skip a meal, it's like, whoa, what do you mean you can't skip it? What do you mean you can't go without a day eating? You get angry, you get irritable, there's something else going on.
Perfect. I love that. I'm going to snip that and just send it off to a few clients for sure. You touched on protein. I see a lot, like it goes back and forth on social media or in the news, on TV, protein and carbs. Like some experts are saying that there's too much protein and stop eating protein, but I'm sort of on the other end where I'd rather people eat a bit more protein because people are just over consuming carbohydrates without realizing it. So how should people think about protein?
It's essential. You need it. And the thing about protein that's interesting, as you get older, your body recycles it less efficiently. So the average person needs probably 200, roughly 1 gram of protein per pound. So I weigh 180. So I need 180 to 200 grams of protein. Let me finish that. So before you start saying I don't know what I'm talking about, okay? I remember Arnold Schwarzenegger, when he was in his prime, he was consuming about 250 grams a day of protein, right? He weighed about 240, right? Now he's a professional bodybuilder. I'm not a professional bodybuilder, but those are my needs, right? But the thing is, my body recycles it. So my body will take that 80 grams that I consume and recycle it 3 or 4 times. So my body's needs are pretty high, but because I recycle it over and over and over again, I don't actually have to consume that 1 gram per pound. I can consume, 1 gram per kilogram, which is, 2.2 times less, right? And as you get old, but as you get older, your body recycles stuff less better in general. You recycle creatine less well, you recycle CoQ10, you recycle vitamin C less well. So all of a sudden your nutrient needs as you age go up, particularly in women, not because you're more physically active as you get older, because you absorb it less well and you recycle it less well. And when you're younger, you can get by with eating less protein because you recycle it so well. So I think that's part of the conversation, and it all depends on where you're at in the spectrum. And then you throw in if you're fit, if you're athlete, if you work out, then obviously your needs go up. Typically, a person is going to need at least probably 1 gram per kilogram of body weight. So if you weigh like 70 kilograms, you'll need 70 grams. And that's like for just maintaining your body physiology. I think where people get stuck in this is they're looking at these studies and like, what's the protein source? Is this a plant-based protein? Is this an animal-based protein? What kind of animal? Is it a ruminator animal? Is it a chicken? Is it fish? And that's where people kind of get lost in the weeds, the protein sources. And are you consuming a complete protein, right? But meat in general is nature's like B vitamin. When you eat meat, you're getting B vitamins, you're getting trace minerals, you're getting a lot of interesting things. Another part of the protein conversation is organ meat. In America, before 1950, 30% of all meat consumption was organ meat. Now no one eats organs anymore. And organs have more collagen in them. They have more of these trace minerals, rare earth minerals, and things like that. And then there's other parts like bone broth. You need collagen, trace minerals, rare earth minerals, these things that tend to get concentrated in collagen and connective tissue, which is part of the craze with collagen right now. It's like we've had 50 to 60 years of not eating anything with collagen in it, and then we've created a collagen deficient, country. And all of a sudden, like, oh, I felt so much better after my collagen peptides. It's like, you wouldn't if you were eating your bone broth and all that kind of stuff for the last 10 years. And to this point, I don't know if you've heard of C15. Does that sound familiar? Okay, so about a third of Americans are C15 deficient, and C15 is an essential saturated fat. And dolphins, it's associated with early onset dementia. And actually, the C15 was actually discovered to be associated with dementia in dolphins. Some veterinarians saw dolphins getting dementia early. They realized, hey, they changed their diet, dementia went away. Come to find out they were C15 deficient. Let's check humans, and this is in America. And 30% of Americans are C15 deficient. Oh my gosh. And now there's a supplement, C15, and you can get it online, buy your C15 supplement. Now it's social media, blah, blah, shiny thing, C15.
Yeah.
But the question is like, where does C15 come from? It comes from the fat and milk of ruminators. Okay. Well, we've removed all the fat, low fat milk, low fat dairy, low fat everything for 50, 60 years and induced this deficiency in our country. So is the answer the C15 supplement, or is the answer don't remove essential fats from our diet? And so I feel like part of these conversations is a protein thing. You miss all these nuances, and some of these protein deficiencies are induced by the fact that we've been eating poor quality proteins as a culture for, at least in America, for maybe 50, 40, for a long time.
Yeah, I'd say Australia is very similar, and we follow. I think we follow a lot of the trends that happen in America.
Yeah, but you have Vegemite there. We have some really good friends from Australia, and he introduced me to Vegemite a while ago, and I just don't quite get that. But
most Australians don't get it either.
Oh, they don't. Okay.
No.
I thought he made some.
I think it's like a joke. It's a joke
Really?
for the rest of the world.
Okay.
Yeah, a few people love it, but very few.
Okay, he made it sound like this is like some amazing Australian thing. I'm like, oh my gosh, like what is this again? It's like the stuff on the lime on the bottom from when they make beer. I'm like, whatever.
Let's switch gears into your book. So you wrote the book because of Anna's experience?
Correct.
Yeah. How long ago was that?
The book got published November of 2025, so it's been out maybe about 6 months at this stage.
Mm-hmm. So what will people learn from the book? And since then, is there anything that you would have added in that you've learned?
So, that's a good question. Basically, the gist of the book is my daughter, she's my most difficult case. Exposed to crystal meth her entire pregnancy, had a stroke before she was born functionally blind, in a drug coma for the first 6 months of her life. I could go on and on. And she's thrived. A typical kid with cerebral palsy with her diagnosis has had 13 surgeries by the time they reach 20. It's really typical for kids with CP to have multiple pneumonias, multiple infections. She's had antibiotics once. And even the dental stuff, if you know anything about crystal meth exposure, people literally have their teeth follow their face. She's had no cavities, okay? Like, you don't get these kind of outcomes. Like, if she was a neurotypical kid, she would be my Olympic star athlete kind of thing, She's just killed it. And the point of the book is if she could do this, you can do it too. Like, no matter where you're at, like I've worked with a lot of really sick people with really crazy situations, and she has been the worst case I've worked with, and she's excelled. I've worked with other people as well, but the point of the book is like to hear her story, to hear it, and to realize you can do this too. No matter where you're at, no matter how hard things are, there are answers. There are things out there that can be done. Don't ever give up. Don't ever give up hope. And if you can't find the answers, you don't give up. You look for someone that can come alongside and work with you. So that's kind of the point of the book. And I give like stories of other patients that I've worked with. Give out a lot of free resources, free food sourcing guide, healthy building guide. A lot of people deal with mold issues. And so there's actually a guide based on the Harvard School of Public Health and their resource on like figuring out if your house is healthy or not. So we have a lot of free stuff in the book. But the point of the book is hope and not giving up ever on yourself and your loved one. As far as something that I would have put in the book that I've thought since then, I tried, I wrote the book like 15 times. Like you write it and you rewrite it and you rewrite it. And it starts out like, 100 pages and blows up to 300 pages and comes down. And so, I tried to put a lot of stuff in there, but then realized that you don't want to put too much because you don't want it to be overwhelming. So it depends on my mood. Like I did talk about lipid therapy a lot, which is actually using fat or different kinds of fat therapeutic, whether it's omega-3s, omega-6s, using phospholipids, phosphatidylcholine. I'm using things that clear out toxins in your brain like butyrate or TUDCA or ursodiol. So I do talk about that a little bit, but I've gotten more in that recently just because I'm having more people with long COVID and neurological issues. And, fatty liver is a really big thing right now. And it's amazing how much fatty liver is related to environmental toxins. And there's actually great research on, and actually in Europe, they'll use phosphatidylcholine IV to treat fatty liver disease, right? Not FDA approved in America, but it's a drug in Europe for use. So I'm doing that more of that in my clinic as well now. So I might have given out some more airtime in the book, but That's a strange question because it depends on what I'm currently. Actually, right now I just finished my dentistry functional certification. That just kind of reminded me how ridiculously important oral health is. So I may have put a bigger emphasis on oral health and how like literally you swallow between 3 and 5 trillion bacteria a day. So think about this for a second. I'm going to sell you, Jack, my most expensive fancy supplement. It's going to cost you $100 or whatever it's going to cost you, and it's going to be like 120 billion, CFUs. And you're like, oh, I got the fancy Dr. Hartman, 120 billion, and then you hear, I swallow 3 to 5 trillion bacteria a day, and all of a sudden, like your oral hygiene, do your gums bleed? Do you have weird things on your teeth? Do you have how do you build tartar quick? That's more important than the fanciest probiotic that I would recommend to you, right? So maybe I would put some more stuff about that into the book. Don't know.
We'll come back to that in a second, but as you were saying, sort of you went through Anna's story and a couple of other stories in the book of your clients. What was the hardest thing that you had to sort of put in the book or write about?
Hardest thing, my daughter was probably the hardest thing. The second hardest thing may have been, I did talk about my father-in-law a little bit, father-in-law, because he's interesting. He's someone who conventional medicine saved his life, and then functional medicine's helping to thrive. He had a liver transplant like 40 some years ago. And it was really, really interesting because he had this thing called, they actually may have redefined it. They didn't know what it was back 40 some years ago. They called it hepatitis 9A, 9B. Then got reclassified as primary biliary cirrhosis, which is an autoimmune disease. And now they're not sure if that's what he even had. But when he had his transplant, his goal was just, I just need my daughters to graduate. Like that was all he knew. And then they graduate. He's like, oh man, I got to keep on working. I got to get them out of college. And then it's like, crud, they're out of college. And my daughter's got this boyfriend. Like, could I actually walk my daughter down the aisle? And it's interesting how like, as he went out further and further, his goalpost kept on going out because his first goalpost, I just want to live for 4 years and get my kids out of high school. And now he's like, maybe I'll see my grandkids have kids. He's like just traveling. He's like 77 now. And it's interesting because he was having some liver issues and et cetera. And we started doing some of the lipid stuff I was talking about. And his liver enzymes are the best they've been in 30 years. And so it was just, the hardness was just like, there's like an emotional stuff and just some of the stuff with, him and you just like for him, for years, he was like, I might die next year. He was like that for decades, because most people, everybody in his class that got transplanted, they all died within like 5 to 10 years. He's the only person that's alive now. He's actually outlasted like all his GI specialists, his surgeons, they've all retired. And some of them actually died. He's still going. So it's really a testament to him, but it's also like, it's hard, when you're like, literally like, I shouldn't be here. And it's been like that for the last, 30 years, right?
I've had these little red lights, the Lumaflex Body Pro, for a few weeks now, and it goes with me everywhere and it goes on me everywhere. I love putting this on my belly in the morning just to help my digestion get rolling. Any little niggles I've had from training the day before goes on there, a few rounds, and I'm ready to jump back into the gym. It's absolutely crazy how fast you can feel the effects of this red light therapy device. It comes with these amazing little straps that you can literally strap it to any part of your body, joints, limbs, anywhere. So anywhere you need a little bit extra recovery, it can do that. A couple of rounds of the red lights and you are good to go. And you can get access to Lumaflex Academy, where you can actually start learning about the benefits of red light therapy and how to use it properly so you can actually see the benefits in your body as well. So check out the link, lumaflex.com.au, use the code TRUEFORM and get 10% off your Lumaflex products. It's part of it, isn't it? Like, we talk about all these health things, but like you said, he just had all these goalposts that sort of probably sparked him up a little bit just to want to keep going and do the things he needed to. So yeah, it's interesting how we can talk about all these health things and like exercise, food, all that sort of stuff. But if you don't have those goalposts or that want to do it, then it's not really going to happen, is it?
Yeah, well, for his story, he's also interesting because he's the kind of guy that like saved up all of his vacation time. He saved up 6 weeks of vacation time so he could go get a transplant. And so he's like, well, I got to keep getting paid and I got to, afford my insurance. And then after that, he made job decisions based on health insurance because it's like, I can't go without health insurance. So he made a lot of sacrifices, made a lot of decisions solely based on his health status, because he was like, I need to do what's best for my family. And that's, sometimes it's like, I can't take a Tylenol or Advil. I can't, drink a glass of wine because my liver doctor said I can't do that. And, he made a lot of sacrifices because he's like, I just want to be around for a couple of years. And that it's played out pretty good for him. He's now been
Yeah.
alive longer with someone else's liver than he's, you know, been up without. So it's kind of, and he's, his liver doctor, I think last year said, you're gonna die of something else. It's not gonna be your liver disease coming back, Jack. So just don't worry about it.
Yeah. That's unreal. Let's go back to the mouth. Like you said, it's oral health is very important. And the mouth is just so overlooked. No one really pays attention to it. So what are some things that we can talk about there or people should be focusing on?
So oral inflammation can drive systemic inflammation. So if you have periodontal disease and you're a female, you're more prone to premature labor, you're more prone to miscarriage, you're more prone to gestational hypertension, small for gestational weight kid. In general, you're more prone to heart disease, cardiovascular disease. All of a sudden, like when people, I don't know if you've heard the term leaky gut or leaky brain or any of those terms before, there's actually a leaky mouth. And so your mouth is one that interfaces with your immune system. You've got tonsils, you've got adenoids. I mean, literally this whole upper respiratory tract filters the air, supposed to filter the air out that you breathe. Then all this the saliva you swallow, you actually take your meat, your food, you chew it up, you mix it with bacteria as well as enzymes to digest it. And if your mouth has the wrong pH, if your mouth is more acidic, you won't mineralize your teeth as well. You actually won't get the right bacteria makeup in your mouth. And so now you're seeding your entire GI tract all the way to your rectum or your vagina, if you're a female, is being seeded by your mouth. So if you have gut issues, IBS, cardiovascular disease, did you hear a great fact? If you gargle with an antiseptic mouthwash, you increase your risk for diabetes and hypertension. Well, why is that? Because you're killing the healthy bacteria in your mouth that seeds your gut. And part of actually making, if you ever heard the term nitric oxide, it's the stuff that helps like dilate your arteries. If you take Viagra for erectile dysfunction, dilates arteries in your penis. If you take nitroglycerin for your heart, your respiratory tract and your mouth actually start the process of making nitric oxide. And if you don't have the right bacteria to mix with food, with beets or whatever you eat, when it gets to your stomach, the acid won't release nitrates, they won't turn to nitrites, et cetera, et cetera. So the whole process of making nitric oxide actually is starting in your mouth. So if you have the wrong pH, the wrong bacteria, all of a sudden that can set you up for hypertension, diabetes, a whole host of things. And so if someone like has your gums bruise easily, if you make a lot of tartar, if you have a bad, poor smelling breath, if you actually grow stuff on your tongue, like you have a hairy tongue, then you probably have bad oral hygiene and this it's called dysbiosis, but it's bad bacteria in your mouth that's seeding the rest of your GI tract. And now we know there's a 100% correlation with oral health and systemic inflammation. There's great literature on like people who've had carotid endarterectomies. Basically, you have a stroke and you have a blockage in your carotid artery, and they remove those clots. They will find oral bacteria in those clots 89% of the time. Same thing for people with aneurysms around the heart to remove those. Like the bacteria from your mouth actually seed your blood. And if you have way too much of them, you can seed it with the wrong kind of organisms that can cause vascular inflammation, which we now know the biohack for anti-aging is your arteries. You are as old as your arteries. And if your arteries are 10 years younger than you are, guess what? You're 10 years younger. And people, and that's where the other people look at all these fancy biohacks. Ultimately, if you can measure the age of your arteries and then change that, that is the anti-aging biohack. That's, William Osler, who was the father of medicine, the modern medicine in 1893 said, a man is as old as his arteries. So this is over 100 years old, and yet we're looking for the fancy new thing. Like the fancy new thing is the old thing, and so, but a lot of stuff starts in your mouth.
So what should we be doing for like taking care of our mouth and keeping it clean or healthy?
I mean, you want to brush your teeth, you want to floss. I mean, things your dentist tells you to do, and then it's like, do your gums bleed easy? When you brush your teeth, do they bleed? When you floss, they bleed. If you do, you have gingivitis, inflammation in your gums. You probably have bad bacteria in your mouth. What's your pH of your mouth? You can buy on Amazon these pH strips by Physiology. From 5.5 to 8 is the pH range. And if you put spit on it, it should turn like dark blue. It'll give you the pH range. If your mouth is not alkaline, it's acidic. So all of a sudden now it's going to affect mineralization of your your mouth, but it's also starting the whole digestive process. So, bleeding gums, brush your teeth, um, breath, and then, obviously brushing your tongue as well. And then if you do all that and your mouth is fine, but you still have other issues, there's actually, you want to get fancy, there's actually DNA testing you can do that actually will measure the DNA in your mouth and tell you like how much you have in your mouth, and then it will correlate it with what bacteria are associated with what diseases. And so you can actually see, do I have bacteria in my mouth that could be associated with different diseases? One thing that's really cool to do is also do the same thing with your gut, do a stool test and look for DNA, and you can test and you can match them. And I've done that with patients. One of my patients, he actually, it's actually a friend actually who had collagenous colitis, which is an autoimmune gut kind of thing. It's interesting. His gut is populated with oral bacteria that are known to be related with colitis. And so all of a sudden it's like, and he had a bunch of bad dental issues and all this kind of stuff. It's like your mouth is part of your non-resolving autoimmune gut issue. So, doing the basics, but also having someone, having someone you can work with that is, we call them a biologic dentist in here in the United States that understands these things and can work with you.
Mm. Mm. Are there anything else like on the body that people are overlooking like that? Because again, like brushing your teeth, for some people, that's just crazy and they don't actually do it, which like, again, I just find ridiculous. But anything else that we can pay attention to on the body? Like you said, the mouth is the one of our senses to our nerves, not the nervous system, sorry, I'm blanking on what you said. But our health system in our body. So obviously we eat things and we experience it.
Yeah, your mouth is a window to, so your eyes, your eyes, if you have inflammation in your eyes, if you have, your eyes are interesting, how quickly they dilate and open up. Obviously patients who have dysautonomia or POTS, which are an imbalance in the parasympathetic and sympathetic nervous system. And when you shine a light in people's eyes, you'll see their eyes like constrict and then open back up really fast. So constriction is parasympathetic and dilation is sympathetic. So it's like they come down, but they'll fight that. And you can actually see people's eyeballs like do this little undulation. It's like, I can tell your nervous system is imbalanced. You're looking at someone's tongue. Is it smooth? Is it rough? You can have certain B vitamin deficiencies that your tongue will get red and you like kind of lose the papillae. It'll be smooth. Your skin is a great thing. People's skin ages a certain range. Women, for example, who have low estrogen, their skin will age quicker. They'll get final wrinkles at a younger age and get these like the sunspots called lentigo easier. And also certain nutrient deficiencies can make your skin age a little quicker as well. Looking at people's nails, how your nails grow. When you get ridging in your nails, that can be a marker for low stomach acid, as well as insufficient protein. And then you can get these little white spots related with zinc or selenium deficiencies. It's one of those things. I learned how to do physical exam in medical school, and people like, you learn all these cool things and you get to, do your residency training and get out and you just like, we don't want to do physical exams anymore. We just order tests. It's like a physical exam tells you a whole lot. When I do one of the things I'll do is check people's pulses. When I'm listening to the heart, but I feel both wrists. And you can actually, when you listen to the person's heart, you can hear like a gap between when their heart beats and when you feel it in the wrist. And when you're young, the gap is bigger, because your arteries are like a balloon that fills up and then it goes out. And so the stretchier that balloon is, the longer it takes for the pulse wave to go downstream. So if you're older and you feel people's pulses, literally the heart will beat and you feel the pulse at the exact same time. Ooh, you've got like, some hard arteries. Well, if you feel that in a younger person, usually it's related to sympathetic overdrive and their arteries will unnaturally kind of clamp down. And it's funny how in traditional Chinese medicine, they measure the pulse, but they do it and say your chi's stagnant or whatnot, which I don't quite understand that, but they kind of saw this thing, 3,000-4,000 years ago, that imbalance suggests your nervous system is imbalanced. There are so many things on a physical exam that are overlooked by doctors that can be signs of underlying deficiencies or things going on.
Yeah, 100%. And a lot of people just don't even pay attention to how their body looks or feels. So that is a great point and a good thing to do. I just want to touch on, before we wrap up, wearables. Do they come into that as well? Like, how do you think about those?
I personally really like wearables because they give you instant feedback. Everybody's got their favorite one for different reasons. I like the Oura Ring because I don't have to think about it. I don't have to, it's just on my hand, and all I got to think about is charging it up every 4 to 5 days. And it gives me what I feel is the most important data. It gives me my physical activity, how many steps I took a day. It gives me my sleep, my quality sleep, how many hours of REM, how many hours of deep. Looks at my heart rate variability, which is a great marker for actually the balance in your sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system. And it also gives me, it gives you like a vascular age, which it's really interesting. The technology it uses is plethysmography. So it's actually measuring like when your arteries like pulse, they'll like move like this. It actually measures that. And based on your chronological age, will say you're older or younger by a certain amount. And then throughout the day, if you have certain stress levels, it'll look at your heart rate throughout the day and come up. So I really like it. The app is pretty easy to understand. And like if I forget about it, I use it as my wedding ring. So it's like, it's not like, oh, I forgot about it. I can look back and look at my dad. And it's funny, when I got COVID back in 2022, I could actually watch my temperature kind of spike up and look at that and go, wow, my temperature, I had like 103 fever for like 8 days straight. So it's interesting how I could see it ramp up and down. But then using that data point, when I've got hit with other viruses, you can kind of start seeing, I'm starting to get sick. Like usually 24 hours before it, you'll see your body temperature at night kind of go up. So I feel like it gives me like all the major data points I want in a super simple way. And if I forget about it, you know what? It still collects the data for me. And if I want to look back at it, I can. Everybody got their favorite. But I like things like that. Also, if you have a poor night, because sleep is super important, right? It's also one of the ways I figured out that for me personally, I can't eat any sugar within 3 hours of going to sleep. Otherwise, I don't get good REM and deep sleep. If I have any alcohol within 4 hours, it affects my sleep. It's also how I realized that look, hear about looking at screens. Oh, don't look at screens. I can do what I want. I'm, doctor. I can, it doesn't affect me. I can't look at screens 2 hours before I go to bed. Otherwise, my sleep latency is delayed, and it also affects my my heart rate variability and like how much deep sleep I'll get. It cuts into that in the first part of the night. So I think it's a good wearable that gives me what I think are the most important data points. But everybody, I think they're useful because you need something immediate. Coming to see me, getting a bunch of labs done, and me calling you back 2 weeks later to tell you what your labs were a month ago. You're like, I don't know what was going on a month ago.
That was going to be my second question. Like, is it useful for doctors having that data?
It's more useful for the patient because it helps you, like, you should exercise, you should get adequate sleep, you should not stress as much, and you get, all the things I'll tell you to do. It's like, how do you measure that? How do you know you're getting adequate quality sleep? How do you know you're physically active enough? How do you know what your VO2 max or all these kind of things? And you can use these devices to give you that stuff that elite athletes want, but in a way you can digest it without costing you, thousands of dollars, and you get it same day. Like if you send me a bunch of data and I look at 3 weeks from now, are you gonna remember what you did like a week ago? Like it's best, I look at my data every morning when I wake up, and that's what you really need, something you can look at on a daily basis, and so you get that instant feedback basically. So it's more helpful, I think. It's more helpful for the patient to have it than for the physician.
I just have one, as when we're talking about it, I just got one client where she just obsesses a little bit about data. Like we've tracked her data, glucose and all that sort of stuff as well with a continuous glucose monitor. But every time she's eaten, she's looking at the app, and I'm just like, you just need to chill and just not stress too much and just let it run, and then we'll look at the data once it's finished. Do you have any tips on what would I say to her?
You know what? I tell people routinely, if working with me, like stress is so bad for you. If working with me makes you stressed, it'd be better off if you've never met me. And so what people don't realize is all of a sudden, if these data points become a stressor, for your client, for example, if her cortisol goes up, her glucose is going to go up. And I was actually doing an interview earlier on with a friend of mine on her thing, and she was talking about her continuous glucose monitor. Like her sugars go up when she goes in the doctor's office because she gets stressed. And so she can measure it on her CGM. And so all of a sudden, for her, the act of going to the doctor's office to get blood work done and talk to a doctor make her numbers goes up. And so if your client is being stressed about it, it could have a negative impact on it. And then all of a sudden, it's also going to impact how if your cortisol's up, you're eating a meal, it's going to slow sugar absorption, right? So it's going to have negative impacts metabolically. The technology is cool, but you really can't stress you out. It Yeah, it can't stress you out. It can't become detrimental. If it is, then it's probably better off not to look at it. And there are some people who will they want the data and it kills them. It literally
Yeah.
makes them worse.
Yeah. Like they see the bad sleep score in the morning and then they're stressed for the rest of the day.
Or they go online, they see their B12 level came back at 398, and they go find some random article on Google. It says they have an increased risk for neuropathy and dementia, and they're, oh my gosh, I'm gonna die. I'm like, it's like, you stop taking your B complex, just go back, you'll be fine. It's like all of a sudden they're like perseverating on this and the small thing, or my vitamin D level came back at 39. It's normal, but now I see it associated with increased risk for breast and prostate cancer. I'm like, so get it up. Like, don't, but they're, I'm saying they perseverate on that one thing that just haunts them for the next 3 to 6 months before they recheck their vitamin D level or whatever. So there are those people that that is actually probably detrimental for. And it's just, that can be difficult because they want it and you want to work with them, but it's like, this is too much for you.
Almost need a tracker where the coach or the doctor only sees the data and the person can't see any of the data.
I could look at my data and be like, my cholesterol is 240. It should be lower. My HSCRP is fine. Have a good diet, get good sleep. I'm not going to worry about it because, cholesterol is not the best biomarker. I have patients who could never, if they saw the cholesterol be high, it would wreck them,
I'm the same, but I'm going through something similar. Every time I go to the doctor, my blood pressure just goes through the roof. And I can even feel it now, thinking about going to the doctor and getting my blood pressure done. I feel my blood pressure now just rising. So we're going through this whole thing of, sorting out my blood pressure. So it's an interesting thing. Like, it's never happened with me with data before, but it's just that blood pressure. It's just, it's weird. So it's fun. Aaron, I appreciate you coming on the podcast. Where can people learn more about you and connect with you?
I have a website set up, aaronhartmanmd.com, and it takes people to my practice website, to my social media, Instagram, Facebook, to my book, as well as my podcast, which is Made for Health. So I just tell people that's like the hub that takes people to all my other stuff.
It's morning here. The sun's just rose. If you could just leave everybody here in Melbourne with one thing that they could do today, this morning, what would it be?
You know what? I really love sitting outside with my cup of coffee and watching the sunrise and just reading, watching it rise, and it's a great way to start your day. And so I think, starting your intention with being grateful and realizing that this world's amazing and life is a gift, and everything else to a certain degree is just filler, and just majoring on the majors and enjoying life. I think that'd be my thing. It sounds super simple. Not enough of us are grateful.
100% agree. And if people just start the day off a little bit slower and just take a time to think and just be grateful for the day, it'll be a better world for sure.
Yeah, as an American now, I feel like the image of Australians is, because my friends are from Australia, they're all super laid back. So as an American that we're like super stressful, I feel kind of weird saying it's all a bunch of Aussies, but you asked, so.
I guess we get stressed in different ways.
Okay, man. I mean, everybody I've met from Australia is usually super cool and super relaxed. Like, hey, no worries, buddy. I'm like, man, y'all are super like chill, man. It's awesome.
A big thanks to Lumaflex for sponsoring today's episode. Make sure you check out the link in the description or go to lumaflex.com.au. Use the code TRUEFORM to get 10% off and start enjoying this amazing red light therapy device. You'll not only be supporting your own overall health and wellness, you're supporting this show as well. So I appreciate you doing that. Appreciate your time listening to this episode, and I'll see you in the next one.